Talk Show.
Recorded live.
These are provisions, broadly and specifically with regards to infrastructure, that Republicans have traditionally supported broadly.
I suspect that one of the really big
No, it's not our.
Mark going to be the immigrant population.
No video.
But I don't, as a president, have the authority to go if our national security is threatened.
Hello?
Possible.
Hello?
Hello?
Todd?
I would remind you that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice. And let me remind you also that moderation in the pursuit of justice is no virtue.
How much did he die? I'm Mexico.
Welcome to Kitty Cat Talk Live. This is your host, Todd Barnett, and his co-host, James Lansford Jr. Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to Liberty Cat Talk Live.
Broadly and specifically.
And let me cut that off. I'm trying to get this through here. I want to thank everybody for joining us for joining us tonight. This is going to be a great show tonight. We have some very exciting guests on here as well. We have one exciting guest on here, and we also have our panel with us. So unfortunately, they may have to call the 744 number because apparently, I guess, TalkShoe won't patch them in through like they did on Blog Talk Radio. So if that's the case, then they're going to probably have to call the 724 number. I'm sorry. The 724 number, which is for those who want to call in, it's 724-444-7444. The call ID number is 91679. You hit pound, and then all you gotta do is hit 1 and then hit pound, and well, you're on the call line. So basically, if you do have a question or what have you, so there you have it. Okay. Apparently, I guess they can hear me. So, I guess they can hear me after all.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you.
Okay, good. Here we go.
Okay, Karen, can you hear me on the air?
Yes, I can.
Okay. All right. So, having said that, Joy, are you with us?
Yes, I am, Todd.
Okay. Well, before we go into everything here, I just want to make sure everything's running smoothly here. I just want to remind my listeners to wear your Liberty caps. We are freeing ourselves from the control of the state. We're freeing ourselves from the control of the Republicans and Democrats. We're fighting them tooth and nail all the time, every day. No excuses. Okay, so having said all that, Jim, my partner in crime, are you with us?
I am here. How y'all doing tonight?
We're doing great. How is your week so far?
It's been pretty good. I've actually got the weekend off for the first time in a little while, so it's been nice.
Oh, goody. Lucky you. I bet you're as giddy as a schoolgirl with a crush on her teacher.
Pretty close.
All right. So, all right. That's great. All right. Well, I'm going to introduce everybody here so that everybody kind of sort of knows who is on the air with us here. She used to be the Libertarian Party of California chairman at one point, or actually the Boston Tea Party of California chairman. And she's been active in the Libertarian Party of California, and I think at the national level, she can correct me on this one. And she's also running for president on the LP ticket. Please welcome the very wonderful Miss Joy Waymire. Joy, you with us?
Thank you. I appreciate it. No, I haven't been on national level yet.
Oh, okay.
But I am currently the chair pro tem for Siskiyou County, trying to get them reactivated, and so far I keep hitting brick walls, but I'm still plugging along.
Oh, that's great. Well, hey, you got to do what you got to do. Okay, and let's see here. Our next panelist here, she is an occasional host of Liberty Conspiracy Radio. She is a very wonderful friend of the movement, and she's a great lady to work with Gardner Goldsmith, and she's been a frequent guest on this show. Please welcome Jackie Fiest. Jackie.
Yes, Todd, thank you so much for having me again. I always love every time I come here.
Oh, cool. Thank you. And finally, our third panelist here, she is a blogger and author, as well as a writer on LouRockwell.com. She is has even been hosting her old radio show, American Forum, and now she's currently running as a congressional candidate on the GOP ticket. Please welcome Karen Kwiatkowski.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Who are you running up against, by the way?
I'm running against, in the primary, Republican primary, against an 19-year incumbent, Bob Goodlatte. And he is a middle-of-the-road establishment Republican. And he is impossible. He has proven to be impossible to unseat here. Even though, of course, he ran on term limits. He's been there for quite a long time. And so the only way to really unseat him is to come up through his primary. We have open primaries here in Virginia, so we will bring in everybody that doesn't like him in one election, and I think we'll be able to do it.
Well, I'll tell you, that's great that you're actually pounding away on this guy. And just to remind everybody here, if, like I said, if you want to call in, if you got a question, or if you want to, just scream or shout or actually say what's on your mind here, please do so at 724-444-7444. The call ID number is 91679 #, and then you got to hit 1 and then # to avoid putting in a PIN code. So there you have it. Okay. Let's get right to it. Well, apparently, a lot's happening this week, and some very, very disturbing stuff happening right now. Apparently, the Houston Police Department is working on using ShadowHawk drones. The idea is to send these military drones to spy on Americans. And remember, these are the same drones that Barry wants to use in Iraq and Afghanistan. And not to mention maybe in places like, say Iran. I mean, not trying to over-exaggerate here, but this is what the cops are using here now. And this is very disturbing. A very disturbing development. Not surprising, though. I think we've got a very serious problem. The police state has been beefing up its efforts to supposedly win the war on terrorism when it's trying to commit terrorism on its own citizens. What didn't you say, Karen?
Yeah, well, I think you're right. Yeah, it's definitely these drones. I mean, the idea of using these military weapons against what they largely expect to be unarmed civilians is, it's all about surviving the state. The state is trying to survive, and people are getting they're going to need those drones. And I'll just say one thing. I looked at the video that you had sent, some video links of these drones in action out over in Houston. And the comments were very interesting because the comments that people were writing were like, hey, that's going to be really easy to shoot down.
Right.
So you gotta actually like that a little bit.
I wonder if some 6 or 7-year-old could probably get a slingshot and just go bing and knock the drone out of the air. I mean,
and they're not quiet. They're not quiet at all. You'll hear them coming. You can see them. They're not very fast. They're going to be a lot of fun in that respect.
Target practice.
Yes.
Target practice.
Yeah.
Or I guess the whole idea is they're going to be using us as like you said, as target practice. I guess that makes the drones sort of like mechanical firing squads against the American people, for crying out loud. I mean, this is exactly what they're doing. They're using this stuff to spy on Americans.
Yes.
And
it could be that all the cameras that they're putting out on the on fixed locations to watch what we're doing is to take pictures of us when we shoot the drones out of the sky. So I think I'm not sure how effective. See, the thing about this country, thank goodness, is we are heavily armed in an individual sense, and it's a good thing. So I'm not sure. I think part of probably the drone purchase, I'm sure it was done by federal funding that's been put down into the police departments. The nationalization of the police. So some of it is probably just selling drones. Making money for the military-industrial establishment. I'm sure some of it is just that, because I don't see how drones will really end up being effective against Americans. We are armed. We have attitude. I just think we'll have more fun with it than the cops will.
Well, I'm kind of wondering, Jackie, has GARD actually touched on this lately? Because I'm kind of wondering if at all, because Judge Napolitano had Lou on his show a while back. And, and those of you who probably don't even know who I'm talking about Lou Rockwell, who's probably one of the best writers on his website here, who goes at great length about these stories. And he was talking about, well, these drones are being used in Texas. Before long, the Texas Rangers will be interested in having them. Next thing you know, states like New Jersey, Illinois, maybe Colorado, maybe California, maybe New York, and who knows, maybe the rest of the country might end up getting these kind of drones. And it's a very scary thought.
Oh, it's horrifying. It's absolutely horrifying. And I've not heard GARD mention it, but my guess would be that if GARD did mention it, he'd tell the story and talk about how disturbing it is. And then, like was said before, remind everyone that we do have a Second Amendment right to bear arms and a Fourth Amendment right of unreasonable search and seizure. There's no reason why the police need these machines. I mean, they don't need these cameras, let alone cameras armed with grenade launchers and stun guns.
Right.
GARD would be screaming for people to blow them out of the sky, and you know what? I back him on that 100%.
Right. I guess, the question here is, GARD would be, totally disgusted. I know GARD would be very disgusted about this, but a lot of people should even be more disgusted about this. Because, imagine a drone coming in, spying on you. You're going swimming, or you're taking a shower.
Oh, yeah.
Or best yet, you're having sex with your girlfriend, or, you're watching, some movies on cable. Who knows? I mean, the cops would probably watch you watching a porno on your TV. And all of a sudden, they can even monitor what you're doing secretly, and not a single person would even notice. Not
Right.
one.
Now, one thing I was wondering as you guys were talking there about these drones and a potential expansion of these drones, in police departments all over the country, but they cost $500,000 each. And if they can be taken out with a bullet that you buy in pretty cheaply, I'm thinking this may not be sustainable. If I'm allowed to use Agenda 21 word, that's pretty darn expensive. And even when they use them in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Yemen, when we use these drones, they are they crash a lot. I mean, they have problems. Sometimes it's because of people shooting at them. Other times it's just the problems of flying a remote control aircraft and computer problems, and you lose your network. And I mean, if you lose cell control, that thing crashes. It's not like you can pick it up when you get back in the zone. So I think at $500,000 a pop, and as vulnerable as these things will be by our own people, I mean, this actually may be a good thing because people will practice their contempt for the government, and that's what we need to be doing, is practicing our contempt. This is contemptuous. I'm not as scared of it. I think I just have contempt for it, and I don't think it'll be sustained. It's too expensive, and we're broke.
I wonder.
Right.
I wonder how the U.S. Supreme Court would rule on this. I mean, this is the thing here. If this were ever to be brought before the Supreme Court, it would probably not surprise me one way or the other that Scalia or even any of those guys on the bench would actually say, you know what, it's constitutional. Oh yeah, it's constitutional. I mean,
I would love to hear them try to explain that.
Yeah, I would love to hear them going on at great lengths about it. Have there been any calls for drones in your state, Joy?
I haven't heard of any, but I wouldn't be surprised. It's just another way to advance the police state. Preparation for the unrest is still coming. People aren't going to stand by forever and let the government keep taking and taking and taking.
Right. I mean, it's just a very shocking. Well, it's not shocking to me, but for a lot of people, it would probably be very, very egregious. Some people, a number of people would probably say, hey, we need to go after terrorists. Remember, we're waging a war against terrorism here. That was the deal after 9/11.
Well, even if you buy into this whole terrorist thing here, even if that really is the case, there's no reason for the local police departments to be flying beans down Main Street.
And not to mention taking out half the population in the local city while they're at it.
I mean, we can't film them, but they can. I mean, when they're in public. But they want to put a camera in my house? No. In my window? No.
Well, in England, they already have cameras on the streets. We're not that far behind. I mean, it's a disturbing thought, but it's a reality coming.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. England was has been way ahead of the curve on this one. I mean, look at, for example, we all complain about what goes on with the TSA airports, for example. And, but England has had that problem even 20 to 30 years before we even started having that. And, hey, we're right behind you, Queen Elizabeth, too. I mean, we're actually coming your way. Jim, do you have any questions about this?
Well, I'm just wondering what, if anything, the panelists might suggest for, regular liberty movement participants to do to protect themselves from the growing surveillance state. Anybody have any suggestions, any best practices that they're doing? Anything you want to share?
I think that one of the most important things we could do, and even though I think that we do it already, is I want to say we need to be vocal and let those in power know we're not going to stand for it, but ultimately I don't think they care what we think. I cannot think of anybody that wants, even people who do not agree with us and even people who support the state, I don't know that they would necessarily support a flying grenade launcher, which is basically what it is. It's a $500,000 grenade launcher and stun gun flying up and down their street.
Right. Considering the fact that they're going to be using these drones, to survey the entire area. They're going to be looking at houses. They're going to probably be looking at businesses. They're probably going to be spying at every single place you can probably think of. It would not surprise me before long that they're going to do the same thing to all of the other bigger cities and even and before long, and I hate to sound like a conspiracy theorist here, like an Alex Jones nut or anything, but this is something that I think could very well expand to say the military can come at any time in your neighborhood and impose martial law, because last week, we did touch on this a little bit, because what happened with the Occupy protests, for instance, and because of what's going on in Oakland and Washington and New York, Obama might just declare martial law. What's to stop them from using the drones on the protesters, aside from us? They can use the drones on anybody at this point. We're basically easy targets. We're fair game as far as they're concerned.
Oh yeah, no doubt, absolutely no doubt. Because we're protesting actions of the government.
All bets are off.
Yeah, we're essentially terrorists, and I'm sure that whoever has stood up again and pointed out the way that the government has been the ones who have largely caused the problems that we're having. If the United States of America, and I don't mean the people, I mean the government. If the government of the United States of America would stop sticking their nose in other people's business, we wouldn't have the problems that we have now. And you can't, and this is just, and now they're taking something that applies, that they say they want to use to catch terrorists, and they're trying to put it in our backyard. But you can't point these things out, because if you do, you support the terrorists. You're trying to get in between the government doing what they have to do to take out the quote-unquote bad guys. And I'm not saying the terrorists are not bad guys, because they are, but I'm just saying they were provoked. And you cannot stand against the government, because if you...
This is what, according to your friend William Gregg, Karen, whom I've had on the show before, on the LRC blog, he writes, he basically is quoting what this Chief Deputy Randy McDaniel, the Montgomery County Sheriff's Officer in Texas. He goes, "I'm tickled to death. It's so simple in its design and the objectives. You just wonder why anyone would choose not to have it." And then he continues, and then since the feds are literally giving them away, why would any local police department turn one down?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing too, though. Again, everything you're saying is true. It's all it's unreasonable. It's dangerous. It's a sign of the police state that is already here. And and we are targeted. Those who stand up against the government are going to be the targeted ones, and it's about fear. It's all about those things. However, at $500,000 a pop, the federal government doesn't get their money except from two places, right? Three. They steal it from us, they borrow it from the Chinese, or they print it. Now, at some point, the money is not going to be there. So I'm just telling you,
right.
$500,000 for one of these very unpopular things, you will see right, left, center, and up and down come together against people. I just don't think it's financially, economically sustainable, and of course it's a violation of any Fourth Amendment by any interpretation at all. Plus, they're vulnerable to not just people, who want to take a pop shot at them. They're vulnerable to operator error. They're vulnerable to heavy winds. They're vulnerable to bad computers. They're vulnerable to losing their network and crashing into the ground and causing damage on private property, for that matter.
They're vulnerable to a strong gust of wind.
That's right. And then the police department gets sued. And one of the reasons, a lot of these, one of the crises of debt that we have coming, and we've seen it in a lot of places already, is municipal debt. And some of that debt has been accumulated by lawsuits that the cities have lost, and most frequently, the guys being sued are police departments, okay? So I'm just thinking that the average poor person in this country, and that would be most of them, okay, are going to see this as a humongous waste of money, something that makes them very angry. And I just don't think, if you've got 45 million people on food stamps in this country, I really don't understand how any municipality, I don't care if this sheriff is tickled to death. That is so typical. Of course he is. He's got a new toy. But he doesn't know what's in the Constitution. And also, he didn't have to pay for it. I bet you if that sheriff had to justify...
he thinks that these drawings... Yeah. He thinks, somehow, right in his mind, he seems to think that these little toys of his are going to be some sort of a video game system for him.
Well, they will be. That's exactly how these things look to the operators. They are video games. Those operators are in buildings, miles away from where the things are operating.
Well, he's going to probably confuse it as part of the Xbox 360. That's the thing, though. This is a guy who really thinks, he's got to type in, his name and his password, and, he thinks it's going to be Call of Duty, drone operation.
That's okay. Those operating it'll ask for a raise, too.
Yeah. Well, first time one of these things crashes into a private property, a building of somebody who's a friend of the mayor's, okay, or somebody who's a friend of the governor, and he gets his building messed up because of an accident, or they taser somebody and then they can't find the body because they don't know where the guy fell. I'm telling you, the lawsuits are going to be amazing, and these aren't even liberty-oriented lawsuits. These are the kind of lawsuits that Americans are known for. You messed up my place, I'm going to sue you. So I'd like to see them actually put a few more out, just so we can watch this whole idiocy collapse. And anything that makes the average American, not us, because we already know the government's bad, but the average American willing to stand up and criticize government and government bureaucrats. Anything that does that is a good thing. So you know what? If that costs a couple more drones and a couple more cities to cause people to wake up, I really think this is one where anybody who can see one of those things flying in the sky, looking into your back bedroom window, I'm thinking this is one that'll finally make the people stand up. Because I thought the TSA pat-downs would do it, but apparently not enough people fly. And so, it's not something that they really... all Americans don't really understand what goes on in our airports today. But this thing here, I can see the people of Houston. Oh, my goodness. They're going to have some fun with this. We should watch how it rolls out.
And before long, it'll be like it'll be like them playing Mortal Kombat in front of American people for crying out loud. What? It's like we got to have rated mature audiences only. It's insane.
Really?
Here's the thing. And just before our next guest is supposed to be coming on in a second here, but one of the things that's been really bugging me this week, and then once he comes on, we'll table it until at the end of our interview with him. But I guess one of the things that's been bugging me is about this whole Herman Cain sex scandal. I know that since this is pure entertainment, I love the Republicans when they get into their little spiel about, Herman Cain's 999 plan, which is more like 666, or maybe the price of a pizza he would charge you. But this sex scandal, as far as the sexual harassment charges are concerned, it is just hilarious. I cannot stop laughing at this whole thing. But what's really disgusting about this whole thing is he's moving up in the polls. despite the scandal. I just don't get it.
I think people, for the most part, even people who are very hardcore statists, especially the hardcore statists, I think they're used to this. I mean, this happens every election cycle. I mean, someone sexually harassed someone, or someone did something stupid in the past, and so their rivals come down and dig it up. I mean, it's every single. I mean, they offered nothing to the American people. They offered no real change. They offered no real fixes to our problems. So they throw up Days of Our Lives.
I agree.
I mean, first, the two women won't come forward, which is red flags there. And then, of course, Herman Cain, he goes on the National Press Club scene, and he's basically saying, I was falsely accused of being sexually harassed. I did not sexually harass these women. Kind of reminds me of Bill Clinton saying, I did not have sex with that woman, Miss Lewinsky.
Right.
I mean, it's, it's like, this is even better than, say, Jennifer Flowers stooping Bill Clinton, or Bill Clinton sexually harassing Paula Jones. I swear, and I'm going to say this once, and I'll probably get my ass chewed out for saying this, but Herman Cain, he's definitely the poster boy for black men who put the word ass in the word harassment. I mean, this guy really is ingeniously hilarious. It's hilarious, nonstop. What do you make of it, Karen? I mean,
well, I haven't followed it all that closely. What was curious to me is where it came from, or where the this information is common knowledge amongst anybody that wanted to know, and certainly the Cain camp knew about it because they had settled. They had settled with. I mean, these were basically history. This was history. This was legitimate history that they were aware of. And so the things that are curious to me is which one of the other Republicans, you can choose either Perry or Romney, which one is the one that did this, and put the information out. And then also why is Cain so ill prepared for
right.
Came out, because it's not like sometimes what happens, it seems like, is somebody comes up, candidates running, and then somebody comes up and says they did something, but it's actually not a court case, or it's an accusation. And it is a legitimate surprise. Well, maybe not legitimate, but it seems to surprise the candidate. But in this case, I mean, if somebody gets paid a year's salary as part of a settlement, that's a really significant amount of,
right.
That's a business decision. So, and he was, so he had to know about it. He had to be a part of it. And I do know some people who have met Herman Cain. In fact, a couple weeks ago, I was talking to a lady, older lady, and she had met him several years ago, and she said the impression that she had, she said, oh, he's such a gentleman, And I thought that's kind of funny. Then 1 week later, after she told me that, is when these reports started to come out. So maybe his gentlemanly reputation had to be destroyed by his Republican competitors, because I'm sure the Democrats had very little to do with this. Cain could not beat Obama. Cain is the one the Obama people want to run.
He's trying to be. He's always been trying to run as the conservative black version of Obama.
I know, and that's not the way to beat Obama. Obama would wipe the floor with him.
Exactly.
And so this is really, it's not something the Democrats did, because they would love McCain. I mean, not McCain. They had a good time with him too, but they would love Cain to have been the nominee. So one of his Republican competitors thought that he was getting, and I hate to use this word, but, uppity. They thought that he was getting too far ahead and looking too good.
Well, the thing is that during the week it came out that the Cain camp. Well, right after he gave that National Press Club interview, he said, well, before that, he said that, he wasn't aware of any settlement. And then he goes on Greta Van Susteren on the record show saying, there was an agreement that my general counsel approached me. Can't remember the number, but there was such an agreement. And this guy's flip-flopping on his story, which
Yeah.
is even worse than the women not coming forward with us. I mean, it's like Desperate Housewives meets The West Wing. I mean...
Well, let's throw another twist in there. Did anybody see the interview last night on TV with the lady's attorney?
Oh.
No. Oh, God.
According to the attorney, the lady didn't bring the charges forward until a week after he had already quit working for the restaurant group. It was the group itself that decided to settle. She claims it was more than one time of a harassment, but it only was over a short period of time. And it was the company that settled. It was kind of like McCain was already out of the picture.
Right.
So I'm sure he heard about it, but no, he was not associated still in the organization at the time that she finally, came up.
Right.
But she agreed to drop everything and never talk about it. That's why she won't come forward.
Right. We're going to table this discussion for a second here. Our guest is already here. He's been waiting patiently for a few minutes. He is the National Chair of the Libertarian Party of California, National Libertarian Party. He used to be the chair of the Libertarian Party of California, and he's been in office since 2010. He's been widely hailed by a number of libertarians in the party. I think he has some very interesting things to say about the direction of the party. Please welcome our very good friend, Mark Hinkle. Mark, you with us?
Good evening, Todd. How you doing?
Thank you. Thank you for calling into the show.
No problem.
I'm glad to have you on the show, and it's a pleasure to have you on. And I just wanted to ask you before we get to the into the nitty gritty here, I guess. I guess what I like to get into here is, well, for one thing, tell us about yourself, for those who aren't aware who you are, how you came into the Libertarian movement, and what made you decide to run for national chair of the party.
Okay, you got about an hour or so?
Well, condense it in just for as much as you can. But
yeah, sure. Actually, interesting enough, I sort of started. I've always been interested in politics. Back in when I was 17 years old, my parents took both us kids to Europe, and we were kind of holed up in the hotel room. So my mother said, "Hey, you really ought to read this book by an author called Ayn Rand." And you can guess the name of the title of the book was Atlas Shrugged. And so I read the book when I was 17 years old, came back from Europe, decided that politics was the venue to sort of put that action into item, or that book into action. And so I nominated myself to become homeroom senator as a senior in high school. And I've sort of been smitten by politics ever since. Later went on to San Jose State, where I got my degree. And I was going to a sort of a renegade Young Americans for Freedom group, kind of the youth group created by Bill Buckley way back when. And Bill Buckley actually came to campus once, and because our little group was somewhat affiliated with the Young Americans for Freedom, the leader of our little group got to introduce Bill Buckley. And as a little thank you for that, we got to go backstage, and a dozen of us or so got to be introduced in a little chat with Bill Buckley, which I was pleased to do. And while I'm being introduced to Bill Buckley and shaking his hand, the gal who ran the little program said, "Oh, and this is Mark Hinkle. He's the Libertarian of the group." And so I'm shaking Bill Buckley's hand. My mouth kind of drops open and saying, "Huh? What?" Well, apparently she had me pegged pretty well, and later on that year, John Hospers, who was the very first presidential candidate of the Libertarian Party, came to campus. I went to listen to him. He was spouting stuff right out of Atlas Shrugged, so immediately that kind of perked my ears up. And so come November, I actually voted for John Hospers, and my one regret in that campaign was that I couldn't remember the name of Tony Nathan, who was the vice presidential candidate. And for those of you who don't know, Tony Nathan has a little bit of a footnote in history as being the first woman ever to receive an electoral college vote. So I felt, I kicked myself that I couldn't remember her name because it had to be a write-in vote here in California. And a couple of years later, I decided, okay, I really need to get serious about this, and officially joined the Libertarian Party. And I've been involved literally since about 1974 in, county chair, state chair, executive committees. I mean, I've served probably just about every role there is in internal party workings. And as far as the running for national chair, I just thought that there was way too much infighting going on at the national level, and we needed to bring some peace and a little cooperation. And so I decided to get back on the LNC, the Libertarian National Committee. And, I think I ran a campaign designed to bring consensus to the group and realize that the real enemy is not within our internal circles, but the real enemy is the ideas that are being instituted in laws in our state capitals and, of course, in Washington, D.C. And
it's very interesting that we've come at a very critical juncture given this upcoming election season. And I think right now the Libertarian Party, ever since election 2008, ever since the nomination of Bob Barr, has pretty much been in a weakened state. And I think the disastrous Bob Barr campaign, I think, Mark, really has set the party back. I think it's really done a lot of significant damage to the party as far as his waffling, his flip-flopping on a number of the issues that are important to a lot of people in this country. And I think the Libertarian Party probably could have been served to get maybe somebody like Steve Covey to be the presidential nominee. If not, despite, the horrific kiddie porn charges that were basically being leveled at Mary Ruward and the accusation that she was advocating kiddie porn, I think she would have made a great candidate. But her campaign suffered, and Bob Barr got in. Wayne Allen Root became the vice president. A lot of people left the party in disgust over that. And I think it's time for the party to really dig deep within its own soul and basically think about where it's going as far as its direction. And I'm hoping that maybe you guys have come to some sort of consensus on that. What is the direction of the party do you think it should go into? And are you with me on this all the way?
Well, again, regarding the Bob Barr campaign, people need to realize that, there were 6 ballots that it took to come to the conclusion of Bob Barr as our presidential candidate. So clearly there was no big consensus to begin with in that campaign. And yes, there were some dirty tricks and some negative campaigning that went on that, frankly, I find very regrettable. And I certainly don't encourage that. In fact, very much discourage that. And I think as chair of the National Party, I've tried to encourage, robust dialogue. But I have this saying, it's okay to disagree, just don't be disagreeable about it. And hopefully I've maintained that. And I think the discourse for the by and large on the LNC has been pretty good. We're libertarians. We have deeply held and passionate beliefs. But as far as the future of the Libertarian Party, I think there's a couple of things. One, I think the party that remains true to its principles has a much better chance of succeeding than a party that tries to pander to and water down our issues. If you look at all third parties in the United States throughout our history, the ones that have had the greatest impact on the body politics have been the ones that have remained true to their principles. One of the stories I like to tell is about the Free Soil Party. And you ever heard of the Free Soil Party?
I've heard of the Free Soil Party, yes.
But most audiences that I talk to, I mean, you're obviously a little better educated on the history than the average person.
They were a political party in the late 19th century that basically was popular at one point, but they started to fade away, and the factions of them actually came to some sort of an agreement, if you will, with the Whigs to form what is now regrettably become the Republican Party.
Yeah, that's true. They're as the name Free Soil sort of implies, they wanted to open up the West to homesteading. And in fact, you can look it up on Wikipedia. I don't remember the exact slogan that they used, but free soil, free labor, meaning not slavery, was part of their slogan. And essentially, they wanted to open up the West to homesteading. And they did manage to get a modicum of success, and the Democratic Republicans and the Whigs who were in charge in Washington, D.C., sort of saw the handwriting on the wall and said, gee, this is a group that seems to be gaining some popularity, so we better co-opt their idea. And that became the Homestead Act, which I think was in 1846, if I recall correctly. And that opened up the way to homesteading. And so basically everybody who is like west of the Mississippi can thank their lucky stars for a political party they've never heard of, because now you're part of the United States, whereas had that not happened, who knows what out here in California, I might be living in Mexico if it weren't for the Free Soil Party. And that's the sort of leverage that I think third parties can bring to the body politics here in the United States, but only if you remain true to your cause.
Right. Well, the interesting thing here is, what's very, I guess, very disturbing to me is this whole notion that, now that the Libertarian Party, because it really needs to stick to its roots, and a party that really doesn't stick to its roots, to me, is a party that really isn't a party worth supporting. And as far as I'm concerned, when you've got some candidates who have ran for office in the past, some of them who were running on very conservative-esque positions, and we're talking neocon positions on some of them, I think that really hurts the image of the party pretty much. David Nolan, the late David Nolan, who was, when I had him on the show about over a year ago when I was interviewing him, even noted at one point that, the Barr campaign threw Wayne Allen Root under the bus. And Bob Barr, even in one interview where I think it was Lou Rockwell, I think he was being interviewed by Lou Rockwell, where he said, the reformers in the party, if they really wanted to reform the government, they should be running on the major party tickets. Why the LP? They should be running as Republicans if they're really interested in reforming and not really radically changing the landscape.
I've always thought that the way to reform either the Republicans or the Democrats, and frankly, I don't care which one of them co-opts our ideas, if they want to compete to out-compete each other to co-opt our ideas, hey, I'm all for that. But I think you're right. If we remain true to our cause, I think we're much more likely to have a leveraged effect. Working within the Republican Democratic Party, frankly, I know in the Republican Party there's the Liberty Caucus. I kind of look at what they're doing, and I don't see a whole lot of progress. And I think
I love Bill Westmiller. I mean, he's trying to, bring the spirit of liberty within that party alive, and I give him kudos for trying. I give kudos for a lot of the people in the GOP trying for doing that, but I just don't think they're really getting anywhere with it. I don't think they can really libertarianize the GOP. And even the same argument would apply to some libertarians who wanted to libertarianize the Democratic Party through the Democratic Freedom Caucus. I just don't think it's going to happen. What say you on that?
I think you're totally right. I think if you look at the history of third parties, the way they have the most leverage influence on the old two-party is to step outside of the political parties, provide competition for them, and particularly in areas where you have relatively decent gerrymandering, unlike out in California where everything is heavily gerrymandered, either Republican or Democrat. But if you've got districts that are relatively evenly balanced between Republicans and Democrats, a libertarian can come into the race and literally force the Republicans and the Democrats to start talking about libertarian freedom-related issues, minimum government, more civil liberties, etc. And I've run for office, 7 or 8 times, and I've seen this every single time I've gone to a candidate forum or appealed on radio or TV. The Republicans and Democrats typically would like to engage in the he said, she said, mud-throwing mudbath, and I talk issues, and, literally, unless they want to sound like complete idiots, they've got to step up to the plate and start talking about real issues. And more than once, I've heard Republicans and Democrats, oh yeah, I agree with Mark on this issue or that issue. And frankly, the competition is really the only way to reform the Republican and or Democratic parties. But co-opting them from within, you look at the GOP leadership and how they're ignoring Ron Paul and how they're just ultimately totally dismissing Gary Johnson, two libertarians who were trying to seek.
But Ron Paul has an advantage there. That's the difference, though. He has an advantage. He's been there since 2008. He's had basically the strong support since 2008, or even maybe a little bit before that. But he's kept that momentum going, and at least people know what to expect from Ron Paul. At least they were able to identify with him because people realize, hey, this man's right. Everything that he predicted would happen happened, and they're coming to him. They may laugh at him in some ways, but not as much as they did. He's much sharper, much quicker with his responses. He's speaking in more smaller sound bites than he did 3-4 years ago. And whereas Gary Johnson, he's relatively new, and he's basically become nothing but an underdog in the entire race.
Yeah, well, in fact, Ron Paul actually has been saying the same message pretty much throughout his entire career. He was our presidential candidate in 1988, and the message that he had back then and the message he has now is pretty much the same message. We want to drastically reduce the size and cost of government, get rid of the Fed and the income tax. That's the message Ron Paul has been saying pretty much throughout his career. And both Gary Johnson and Ron Paul are officially members of the Libertarian Party. Ron Paul is still a lifetime member of the Libertarian Party, and Gary Johnson, while he was governor of New Mexico, was actually a dues-paying member of the Libertarian Party. So they've got deep roots, and are they being taken seriously by the GOP leadership? No, they're not.
No.
That's sad.
And that is sad because, even if they did win, they would not probably get the modicum of support that they would probably give to, say, the likes of Mitt Romney or even Herman Cain. So I think right now at this point, with Mitt Romney or Herman Cain, I think Mitt Romney is probably more likely going to get the nomination at this point. I hope I'm wrong. I hope Ron does get it. I hope he surprises everybody at the end of the day. I'm just really not seeing it.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. In fact, I think if you look at the GOP leadership and the Democratic leadership, they're power brokers. That's what they sell. And Ron Paul and Gary Johnson, they're not selling the power broker message. And so you're right. The people with the big monies who want to buy and sell legislatures and buy and sell the Congress, they're not interested in Ron Paul because Ron Paul can't be bought. Gary Johnson can't be bought. These guys have a clear vision of what their philosophy is, what their ideological bent is, and they're not going to be bought and paid for by these special interests.
Right. Which brings me to another question I have for you, and then I'll open up the discussion to the panel here. But I'm just curious. I saw your piece from the Libertarian Party press release. And by the way, I recently came back to the party, so I'm now a capital L Libertarian.
Oh, pleasure.
I saw the press release that you did just recently in which you were basically excoriating Obama for saying that he's pledging not to use lobbyists in his re-election campaign. But he made that same talking point back in 2008 when he was first running for president. Now he expects us to believe him this time around when there's been no transparency and he has done nothing to basically revitalize the economy. This is something we all expected him to do. But the lobbyists pretty much run the show in Washington, D.C., thanks to the corporatists. And basically, we have a very big, powerful corporate state running here. Isn't that the case, Mark?
Absolutely. In fact, one of my favorite quotes, I think this was attributed to P.J. O'Rourke. I said, when the legislature controls what is bought and sold, the first thing bought and sold is the legislature. And that is the quintessential problem here. Because Congress is so involved in managing the economy, those in the economy who want to gain special interests and special favors and special tax breaks that they can't get in the open free marketplace are going to go to Congress. And that's one of the reasons why the IRS code is so convoluted, is because there's so many nooks and crannies where one particular corporation can squeeze through and get a competitive advantage over some other corporation. And that's the sort of thing that we need a divorce between the economy and the Congress, much like we have, in theory, a separation of the church and state. We need a separation of the state and the economy, because clearly there's just been so many examples in history where government has clearly demonstrated they have no clue how to run an economy. Obama seems to be running on the FDR playbook, and that led to a 10-year depression. Clearly, if we don't change our course, we're going to have another 10 or 20-year depression. Let's hope we don't have a world war to get us out of that depression, because we don't need another third world war. Millions of people dying because of that, all because of incompetence in Congress and in the executive branch. It's so clear that to get them out of the way, let the economy grow, and have prosperity if we can just get the government out of the way.
Right. I guess one thing I want to add here is, what really gets me more than anything else is that Obama tried to say that he was going to have a transparent government, but then he backpedaled on that. And look what we got. I mean, basically, he's sort of like saying, folks, my fellow cabinet members, what happens here in Washington stays in Washington, and we don't want this getting out. It's leaking out. And
Todd, you know how to tell if a politician is lying, don't you? Their lips move.
That sounds like a joke.
Yeah, their lips move.
Right.
Is that you, Karen?
Do you have a question, Karen? Do you have a question for Mark Hinkle?
No, I think he's doing a great job. I really like the he's standing up for principle, and it's hard. I'm not an expert on parties and stuff like that. I'm running as I'm playing a party game basically because I need to get better representation in the 6th district. So the only way that I'm going to be able to do that where we are is to run as a Republican, and I'm running in a state where the Republican Party of Virginia just excommunicated our Attorney General, Ken Cuccinelli. He is probably the most conservative person that we have in public service in the state of Virginia, okay? And they excommunicated him because he endorsed an independent over a party-chosen Republican in one of the local Commonwealth attorneys' races. He is currently no longer a Republican. So I share that with you because it's pretty interesting, I think, just from a party politics point of view. And it's also a huge opportunity for all third parties, but particularly the parties of principle. And, as we get poorer and poorer and as we recognize the kind of coming together of the state and the economy, the corporate state, and it's everyone's enemy, and we're the ones that parasite feeds on. As Americans all over and from different parties all start to realize this, they're going to be looking for explanations, and those explanations are not going to come from the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. I think, in my view, they're going to come from the Libertarian Party. If they come from a party at all, it will be the Libertarian Party that can best explain what has happened. So, I'm all about it. I'm good, and I think Mark, you're doing a great job.
Karen, thank you very much, and good luck in your election there. We've got to have candidates out there promoting the idea of liberty because, frankly, the corporate media simply does not let most of the message through, and it's right. One of the objectives that we have. I mean, obviously, we want to win this primary, and we really can do it. The stars are lining up nicely, and we're going to be able to do this, I think. But in the process of getting to that point, we're going to create libertarians. We're going to expose people, and I shouldn't say create them. We are going to reveal to people their inner libertarian, and it exists in everyone, I believe. Well, and I think
we're going to yank it out of them, whether they realize it or not.
Maybe.
Darren, I think you're right, and in fact, there's actually been some statistics for those who are not familiar with Richard Winger. He's our ballot access expert out of San Francisco, and you go to his webpage, and I was very interested to note from 2008 to 2010, the last years that we have the figures for these, only one political party in the entire United States gained voter registration. And I think you can guess which one it is. Of course, it's the Libertarians.
Oh, very good.
And again, here's another, and this ties into Matt Welch's and drawing a blank on his co-authors, The Rise of the Independent.
You mean Nick Gillespie?
Nick, thank you.
Magazine.
How can I forget Nick? Here in California, a couple years ago, I ran for partisan office, and I just kind of wanted to see what the voter registration numbers were, and I was very pleasantly surprised to find out in California, 19% of the voters have said, to heck with the Republicans, to heck with the Democrats, I'm registering as independent. And in liberal, Democratic-controlled San Francisco, 29% of the voters said, to heck with the Republicans and Democrats. And, of course, we've seen this across the nation. The rise of the independents is clearly a rejection of the Republicans and the Democrats on a wholesale basis. And so people are looking for alternatives, and they are fed up with the power politics that both the Republicans and Democrats are giving us. And I think that the scene is ripe for a real revolution and a real change in power politics.
What about you, Jackie? You have a question for Marge?
I do. I think like everyone who's listening to this, one of the things that brought me to being a libertarian was, not really feeling like I belonged in any one specific party, and always feeling like I had to apologize when I aligned myself with someone. Like, yeah, I like the Republicans fiscally, but I hate how they're trying to control people, sexually or, socially. You can't be gay, you can't do this, you can't do that. And that's what initially brought me to the Libertarian Party in 2008, less government, more freedom. As I've grown and developed, I have come to be of the opinion that the existence of government in general is what is causing 90% of the problems that we have. So once my membership, and I joined the Libertarian Party in 2008, and my membership ran out, and I've been hesitant to renew it because I feel like if government is the problem, if I support the Libertarian Party that is part of the government, I'm concerned that I am supporting the lesser of two evils. If government is bad, libertarians having a political position, it's just as bad. So I've been hesitant to jump back on the capital L bandwagon. So where do you see as I'm going off? I mean, convince me otherwise.
Well, why do you view the libertarians as being part of the government? I'm curious.
Well, well, I know Ron Paul is not running as libertarian, but let's say, and I know this is probably going to shatter, Todd down to his foundations, but let's rewind time a little bit and say that Bob Barr would have won the entire election when he ran. We would have a libertarian as the president of the United States. We would have a libertarian, a libertarian structure in one of the most evil, bodies. The American government has done so many awful things, and now we would have a libertarian presence in that. And I find myself not wanting to support anything having to do with the United States government. And so I've been hesitant to align myself with the Libertarian Party because I'm aligning myself with the political party. that I can't. I'm having a hard time committing myself to that.
In other words, you're suffering from a form of political schizophrenia.
I think that the Libertarian Party, the official Libertarian Party, may be one of the better things that's out there. But if it's still stealing tax money from people to do what it wants, isn't it still a serve to eat?
Yeah, Jackie, I think that's perhaps this is a major misconception on a lot of people's parts. First of all, the political structure is what it is. It's there, and so if you're going to attack it, you can either work outside the system, as some people do. They basically opt out and become non-voters. But frankly, I don't think pacifism in a political fight, particularly with Republicans and Democrats who literally control guns, is not a recipe for success. I think we need to get into
Don't tell it to Ian Freeman of Free Talk Live. He'll rip you into shreds for saying that.
Wouldn't be the first time somebody would try to rip me into shreds, but I'm still here. But I've gotten involved. Many years ago when I decided, should I get involved in the Libertarian Party? Should I come out and publicly object to what the government is doing, or should I, find some land out in the boonies and go into survivalist mode? And I thought, look, I want to bring a son into this world, a child in this world, and I want this world to be better than the world that I, was brought into. And I've got to go. I think I've got to get out there and fight the good fight and bring the ideas of freedom and minimum government to the people. And if you don't run for political office, media attention isn't there. People don't see your name on the ballot, so those ideas just get washed over if we don't get out there and get on the ballot, run for partisan office like Karen is doing. And because of ballot access restrictions, of course, we know in some places you literally can't run as a libertarian, but you can run as an independent or one of the other political parties. But when you get out there and people in election years in particular are kind of keenly aware of what's going on, and so you have an opportunity to give this message: freedom, minimum government. And as far as things like here in California, the state executive committee, we used to participate in the primary system, but we said, well, wait a minute, this is taxpayers subsidizing the election of party offices. No, that's wrong. And we decided to opt out of the primary system. We actually choose our candidates at a convention where we fund 100% of everything that goes on. So we, through our principles, have opted out of tax-supported primaries, of course, the Republicans, Democrats, they are on the dole. They do take taxpayer money. In fact, I think they get something like $80 million from the taxpayers just each to put on their convention, whereas Libertarians, we fund every penny of our own convention. So I think we've demonstrated that we know how to put a principled position forward, and we enact it with our own dollars. We don't get subsidies from the taxpayers. So I think we're...
In other words, you know how to put on a party all by yourself and not from everybody else.
So I think we're setting a good example. And, as more and more people look at the corruption that's in the Republican Democratic parties, you set a good example. It's like raising your kids. You set a good example, and hopefully sooner or later they'll start mimicking you and become responsible adults. And we need to set a good example so that the United States will become responsible adults.
Joy, do you have a question for Mark?
Oh, I don't have a question. I just want to thank him because back in 2008, I felt the party was going in the wrong direction, especially with Bob Barr, because the people couldn't get it through their heads that even though he was our candidate, he wasn't going to win the election, and we really needed that percentage showing in the polls, but the people wouldn't go for it. They couldn't, give that little bit to get the showing we needed. And I think what Mark's done in trying to bring everything back to the founding principles that David set up when he began the party is fantastic. Okay. And, of course, I know Mark personally, being part of the California Libertarian Party, too.
Hey, Joey, thank you very much. I very much appreciate that. And, by the way...
you're welcome.
Several people have mentioned David Nolan, and I'm very pleased to report that on the eve of the 40th anniversary of the Libertarian Party, which happens on December 11th, the Saturday before, we're going to have a celebration for not only the 40th anniversary of the Libertarian Party, but a tribute to David Nolan.
That's fantastic.
We're going to be meeting in Las Vegas, Nevada, at the Red Rock Casino, and we invite anybody and everybody who wants to come down and be part of that celebration.
I'll tell you one thing. When I first heard about David Nolan passing away, I was just completely shattered. I mean, I had spoken to him. He was supposed to come on my show at one point. We couldn't work out on a schedule or what have you. And to find out that he had passed away from this sudden accident that he had on the road, that he clutched over on the wheel, and if I'm not mistaken, I think he died of a stroke. If I'm not mistaken,
there was no autopsy, but that's the speculation. He pulled over the side of the road and passed away, and I cried when I heard the news.
Yeah, I was just totally shattered because and this just happened, like, I believe it was maybe a little maybe 2 or 3 weeks after the 2010 election. I mean, he was running for, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think he was running for Congress. If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he actually ran against John McCain.
Yeah.
And
for Senate, that's right.
Yeah, for U.S. Senate, right. And did very well in the polls. I believe it was over 5% of the vote, and he really did spectacularly well in the televised debates against John McCain. Definitely held his own against John McCain.
Well, I know I'm grateful to Todd because the day David was on the show, I was one of the panelists, and it was such an honor to be able to share, thoughts and views and find out we thought alike in many, many ways.
And I felt very fortunate this last year of his life that he was elected to the Libertarian National Committee, so I got to work fairly closely with David on a bunch of issues, including putting on the convention. He was on our convention oversight committee, and so it was a real honor to work with him. And again, he's the co-founder, so we owe so much of the Liberty movement and the founding of the Libertarian Party, and let's not forget the world's smallest political quiz, because that was
yes, he did.
And that is, I invite everybody to go to the lp.org website and take that quiz, which is, we put a link into the Advocates for Self-Government, and we actually follow up anybody who scores in the Libertarian Party quadrant. We follow up and send them an information package on the Libertarian Party and invite them to join the movement.
Jim, do you have a question? My partner in crime, Jim, you got any questions for David?
Well, I just had a question. Obviously, Ron Paul is not going to be able to carry on in politics forever. While he doesn't run as a libertarian, he does occupy a large portion of the liberty movement spotlight. What is the LP doing right now to kind of groom future leaders to fill that void, because it is going to be coming sooner rather than later?
Well, we are actually actively involved in running candidates at the local level. The Libertarian National Committee actually put a big chunk of funds into Ed Coleman's campaign, who's running for the Indianapolis City Council. We are engaged in putting together training seminars for candidates or redirecting people to groups like the Leadership Institute, who train campaign managers and campaign staffers, and treasurers, and et cetera. So I think we're doing good things to promote candidates who are running. We're providing infrastructure for candidates, so if people are interested in running, hired somebody, Bob Johnson, who's the chair of the Maryland Party, works full-time for the National Party to recruit candidates and assist in getting on the ballot and any campaign training techniques and any assistance basically that he can offer. So I view the National Libertarian Party as a service organization to our affiliates and to our members, and so I think I bring that perspective that anything we can do to help our candidates to get on the ballot, because ballot access is a key issue for the Libertarian Party and the U.S. Constitution Party, and we're working with them to try to overcome restrictive ballot access issues, because as we all know, Republicans and Democrats don't like competition, so they put lots of roadblocks in the way to try to keep us off the ballot. We've, in 3 times in our history,
isn't there a national organization that actually effectively controls the moderation of the debates only for the Democrats and Republicans? I mean, before the 1990s, there was no such organization for that. And moderators, there are a number of different people who could actually moderate a debate, and they were not necessarily journalists or, say, somebody from like Fox News or Wolf Blitzer or Anderson Cooper. But nowadays, it seems like the top talking heads, the shills for those parties, are pretty much stifling the debate, and that's pretty much what's hurting the third party movement altogether. Don't you think
that's part of the matrix of all the roadblocks they put in? It used to be the presidential debates used to be run by the League of Women Voters, and they were actually more open to the idea of third parties being there. But once it became the Presidential Debate Commission, and I think half of them are Republicans and half of them are Democrats, and of course they have no interest in hearing from any third party. So, that is part of the problem. And of course, the corporate media has bought into that and done everything they can to exclude. And that's frankly one of the reasons why major media, ABC, NBC, and CBS, that's one of the reasons why they've lost a lion's share of their market share, because people are rejecting the crony capitalism viewpoint that comes from the major media, and that's why Internet has grown substantially as far as delivering news. Huffington Post and Drudge Report, and these are household names now because people can't get real news from the corporate media that I grew up with, but now I don't even listen to them anymore.
Couple of questions here. One, what is the party doing to bring more women, minorities, and people of different sexual orientations into the party? I think, the party really hasn't done, and I told David about this over a year ago when I had him on the show interviewing him, and I told him, the party needs to do a better job at doing that. It needs to start it needs to do a much better job of focusing on those groups, because those are probably the biggest voting blocks in a particular presidential election every 4 years.
Absolutely.
I guess my question is, what are you and the National Committee and the party in general are doing to rectify that right now?
Well, I'm very pleased to report, and this hasn't been finalized by the LNC, but I have offered the job of executive director. For those who don't know, Wes Benedict has tendered his resignation. He's gotten himself engaged, and he's going to move back home to Baton Rouge, and so he's finishing up his 2-year term on as executive director. And I'm very pleased to report that I've offered the job to Carla Howell from Massachusetts. And for those who don't know Carla, she's been involved in the Center for Small Government, and she was the one that orchestrated the initiative in Massachusetts that got 45% of the vote to
I remember that.
state income tax. This
I remember that.
knows how to get things done. And as the voice and the chief financial officer of the Libertarian Party, I think it would be a very smart move for lots of Lady Liberty lovers to join the Libertarian Party. And with Carla Howell as our spokeswoman for the party, I think we're going to attract a lot of women into the movement, because frankly, you're absolutely right. I mean, through the history of the Libertarian Party, we have not made it as inviting as we could for women, and I think we need a little more of that softer, gentler side to.
Right.
And I've actually been fairly fortunate. I mean, in my most recent terms on the LNC, we've had 4 and 5 women on the LNC, and I believe that's a record. So I'm very pleased with the women who are currently on the LNC, and they're a great asset to the Liberty Movement and the Libertarian Party.
What are your thoughts on the Occupy movement? I think it's gaining in strength right now. You've got a lot of Republicans who are trying to trash, the 99 percenters. It's very fragmented movement. It's not very coherent. A lot of libertarians have pretty much derisively dismissed it. You've got people like Wendy McElroy, who has said some good things about it. I don't agree with everything that the occupiers are saying on all fronts, but they really, I think that their frustrations are endemic of what's really happening to all of us.
Well, I think much of the same frustration that gave birth to the Tea Party is there in the Occupy Wall Street, and I think there's a lot of similarities there, both in terms of, hey, we know gut level something is rotten in Denmark. And I think both the birth of the Tea Party felt, the same thing, and the birth of the Occupy Wall Street. And there does seem to be some sort of, there's that old definition about Oakland, there's no there, and I don't think there's any quite there yet, but I'm hoping it will develop, and I'm hoping that people will understand in the Occupy Wall Street movement that those who in the movement call for more government regulation is like jumping out of the frying pan into the fire, because so much of the crony capitalism that we have today is because of massive rules and regulation. And this is something that people need to understand. Big corporations, big special interests love regulation because they can hire the accountants, the tax lawyers, and considering that Wall Street is the province of the Democratic Party,
Considering that it's been that way for years, and you've got Republicans cheering it on like there's no tomorrow. Jamie Dimon, the president and CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase, lifelong Democrat, big supporter and big friend of the president for many years. They go way back.
Crony capitalism, that's what it is.
And that's exactly what it is. I mean, Democrats and Republicans have been propping up crony capitalism completely. And, I love it when Republicans on Fox News say, well, it was the government that imposed all these regulations on the bank that led to the 2008 collapse. But their cronies and their lobbyists lobbied for those regulations.
That's right. Absolutely right.
They lobbied for them.
Well, here's a question. I attended a debate last year about regulation versus deregulation, and I had a question for the guy who favored regulation. I said, look, it seems to me you've got a fundamental problem with regulators, the people who actually do the regulating. You either have people who are regulators who come into the role as a regulator from the industry in which they're regulated. In other words, they have a conflict of interest. Or they come outside the industry that they're regulating, in which case they're ignorant. So you either have people who are complicit with the regulating group, and regardless of what it is, or you have people who are ignorant. So either way, it seems to me it's suboptimal situation. So regulation basically is great for the big special interests, but the vast majority of small businesses, medium-sized businesses, they can't afford.
Right. And with all the guarantees and privileges and loans and IP protections and the elites controlling the underclasses and so forth, they get to have the advantage over the poor. It's wonderful for them, and I think it's a mistake to tax the rich, of course. It's wrong to tax the rich. It's not going to solve the problem. And Republicans are right when they defend against taxing the rich, and they're right on that button. But what they don't fail to understand is that they're the ones that don't have a problem with corporate welfare when it works for them. Democrats don't have a problem with corporate welfare when it works for them either. But at least they're honest about it.
And one thing that I would say to the Occupy Wall Streeters when they call for corporations ought to pay their fair share, I would point out to them, where do corporations, and this is small mom and pop businesses all the way to the largest multinational corporations, where do they get the money to pay all the taxes that they pay? They get it from their customers. So if you think about it, businesses don't pay taxes. They just collect it from their consumers, pass it on to the government. So every tax on business is just a hidden tax on the consumer. Now, the one disadvantage to having the tax policy that we've got is if I'm here in California and I've got a 10% corporate tax rate, and next door in Nevada they've got a 5% corporate tax rate, well, guess what? I'm at a competitive disadvantage to Nevada. And, of course, the same thing applies between the United States and other nations. If the other nations give a lower tax rate or no tax rate at all, then that puts people in the United States at a competitive disadvantage. But, of course, that's our tax policy that's doing that. It's not the competition.
Right. If the Republicans are going to frame that kind of crony capitalism as the free market, and I'm your typical humdrum Joe average who thinks that's what the free market is, I can't blame that person for thinking that way.
Agreed.
I mean,
Agreed.
So
or be defined, and that's why I'm somewhat pleased to hear the term crony capitalism being used a lot more and more in the media, because I think that really does differentiate real laissez-faire capitalism as opposed to crony capitalism. And so hopefully that will sort of permeate through a society, that people will sort of catch on that, oh, yeah, libertarians support laissez-faire capitalism. We're very much against crony capitalism.
Right. Mark, thank you so much for joining us on the show. You've
Todd,
been fantastic.
Thank you very much.
And I know we ran over, but it's been fantastic. You have any final thoughts before you like to go?
I would just ask people to go to lp.org and sign up for the Libertarian Party. And if you'd like to go to Las Vegas on the weekend of December 10th and 11th and be part of our 40th anniversary celebration and tribute to David Nolan, we'd love to have you. And all that information is available on our website at lp.org.
All right, Mark. Thank you so much. You've been fantastic.
All right.
Take it easy.
Have a great evening.
Okay. So here's an interesting thing that did, I guess, to wrap up on Herman Cain. Wow. I mean, even Herman Cain being actually accusing Rick Perry of doing that leak. Wow. Moving right along here, this whole situation with Bank of America. Bank of America just recently announced that they're going to rescind that $5 debit card fee, which was pushed for by the Frank Dodd bill. And I guess my question is, isn't it interesting that this was lobbied for by the banks, yet they're complaining? Yet they were charging this fee, and this is something that even the Democrats and the Republicans actually lobbied for, and the Republicans could have fought against that provision when it came to Frank Dodd, but a number of them actually did vote for it, and very few against it. I mean, isn't it really a surprise that came to pass, Karen?
Well, I think the longer you watch how government operates, then you can see this, and it's part of that crony capitalism. Look, we are the livestock, and they're the farmers, and they're trying to get the most they can out of us until we trying to keep us alive. It's like a parasite. You want to keep them alive as long as you can, but you want to extract as much wealth as you can. So I don't know. I see it as very typical. It's very sad, and I would like to think that since so many people are, or were at least going to be touched by this because so many people use debit cards and would have had to pay that fee, that this would have been a wake up call to some extent on the terrible corruption of the government and the state corporatism that we have, crony capitalism.
What do you think, Jackie?
Well, I'm not at all surprised to think that Bank of America thought it could have got away with this. I mean, when you look at, the banks were able to get tax money out of us to bail their asses out, but the difference with the bailouts that they received from us is then that money was stolen from us, so we couldn't object. But they came to us with this, and boy, howdy, people who are Bank of America customers did object, and they got a face full of just how the American people can be when they're unhappy. I mean, unfortunately, as long as the government still has the guns, it can still force us to still have the power to force us to give them our money. Well, there's nothing we can do about the bailouts, but that's all you get. The American people are not going to be fleeced anymore.
Right. And this is, Joy, isn't it bullshit that the banks are now basically saying, we have to pass this fee on to the consumers, but, had they not, like I said before, a lot of Republicans were complaining on Fox News that the government imposed these regulations. Well, yes, the government imposed these regulations, but your lobbyists basically sent them to Washington to push for those regulations to insulate them because you're a pro-business party, not a pro-free market party.
All they were looking at was at the bottom line and not thinking about the customers. Unfortunately, over the last 50 years, greed has gotten in the way, especially in politics. That's why our economy is so far out of hand. And it isn't just government, it's also, the mind thought of the people have changed quite a bit in the last 50 years, too. The more government regulates and has handed all these free handouts out, people are no longer self-sufficient or self-reliant. They come to depend on government, and then they gripe about what government has done, yet they allowed it in the first place.
And even some of the banks are now saying, well, we're not going to rescind our fees. Bank of America has just basically backed off saying, fuck, I mean, we're not going to have a $5 fee on our debit card, so we might as well just back off of it. I mean, you know, but the banks are basically saying, okay, you know, okay, so Bank of America just, you know, wimped out on this whole deal. Now, but we're still sticking to our guns. You pay the cost, customer. And a lot of the customers who were turned off by Bank of America, even I remember seeing one news report, you know, from my local news channel in which one black woman told one reporter, he asked her, well, would you go back to Bank of America now that the $5 debit fee has been rescinded? She goes, nope, I'm still going to my credit union. I'm going to my local credit union now. Because credit unions aren't charging these fees. Mm-hmm. So at least with the credit union, you're not going to be hit hard with these $5 a month fees every single time that you're using the charge card. I mean, yes, the Dodd-Frank provision did cut the transaction fees from 44 cents to 24 cents, but the banks, it's not like the banks didn't want it that way. It's not like they were complaining about that regulation. That regulation insulated them, but it hurts the small banks. The small banks that don't have that kind of political clout. What say you on this, Jackie?
Well, I want to start by saying that I really, really liked that lady's comment about going to the credit union. I like that a lot more. I've had a credit union, or I used a credit union for a long time, and I found it a lot better than the banks. So I mean, I think she's starting off with something real good there. But
I think she's onto something.
I really do think so too. I mean, granted, when I had the credit union, the area in general that I lived was very different. So, but all in all, the more subjected, the more you are held to your customers, and the more you have to answer to them, the less likely this stuff is going to happen. I mean, unfortunately, you know, the banks do have the government backing them, and they're always going to be able to get something from us in one way or another. But I think she's onto something there. Personally, I think I mean, if we are quote unquote a free market economy like we're supposed to be, if the banks are going to fail, let them fail.
And that's the way it should have been in 2008. AIG should have failed. Bank of America should have failed if they were really going bankrupt, which they were. And, you know, a lot of the big banks, this too big to fail doctrine pretty much got us into this mess. You know, they were saying, even in 2008, that, well, if we just didn't bail out the banks, the economy would have crashed. We would have been in a recession. We're already in a recession. We've been in a recession. And we're so much in debt now that the unemployment rate has skyrocketed because of it. And the people bought into it like, you know, this creepy old guy at a candy store, you know, handing that little fattening chocolate bar to a little kid. I mean, it's not surprising at all. I mean, isn't it interesting that people can actually get away with this, you know? And I have to say, you know, these, as much as, no matter how evil these banks are, what they pulled off was ingenious. They did such a good job just snookering the public into that scare tactic. Wouldn't you say, Karen?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, you know, we're just the dumb animals in this country. I mean, I'm sorry to say that, but we are.
Stupidity rules.
Well, no, I mean, we are. I mean, you know, if you mix the Federal Reserve in with the state bureaucracy and the corporate capitalism, whatever you want to call it, that basically is the way of the world. certainly the way of the United States in Washington. You know, you put all those things together. I mean, you know, in many ways, we are, those people on the Occupy Wall Street, you know, they feel powerless and they're trying to do something. Well, guess what? That feeling of powerlessness is valid, because it really, they're laughing. Banks are laughing all the way to the banks. The government's getting rich and doing their own thing, you know, protecting their interests, certainly protecting their interests. And you know, I told this. I'll share this little story. It's a quote from the guy I'm trying to replace. One of his constituents asked him after a meeting, and they knew each other pretty well, and he asked him after a meeting privately, how much time does this country have? How much is left for the United States, really, seriously? And the guy said about 10 years. Well, he said that a year ago, so now there's 9 years left. Well, this is a congressman who voted to raise the debt ceiling, has continually, you know, spent money that he didn't have. A Republican, of course, not a big spending Democrat. He's a big spending Republican. They're both the same. And, you know, he's spending his way all the way to the bank. He's lining his pockets, his interests, taking care of his interests and his friends.
Right.
And yet he is fully aware that, you know, we have big crises ahead of us. We've been through a few little road, you know, speed bumps, but real crises are ahead, financial crises of a devastating nature. And mainly, you know, brought upon by the government and those that work with the government and those that benefit and receive benefits from the government. So, you know, it's an ugly, ugly thing. Yeah, but we're the dumb animals. But you know what? Times are changing. People are becoming more aware. I think the pain is causing them to think a little bit, which is why I kind of interested in what the OWS, the Occupy Wall Street movement, is doing, because at least you have people acting on their pain. And if they can be informed a little bit better than some of them.
And I love how, you know, the right is basically trying to paint the, I mean, you know, yes, there are some people, there are a number of people, it's largely dominated, it is dominated by people who are socialists, that is true. But there are people in the movement who basically are individualists, they're libertarians, they're anarchists, they're conservatives. I mean, they never talk about that fact, now do they? And what's also very interesting is that they say that the protesters are violent. You know, you've got, you know, a number of them like Greg Gutfield and Kimberly Guilfoyle and Eric Bolling on the 5, and Dana Perino, Bush's ex-press secretary, on the show saying, well, you know, you've got protesters who are shitting on cop cars, and they're having sex in the street, and they're, you know, taking mushrooms and drugs, and
sounds like a good time to me.
Sounds like a good time. You know, and not only that, but you know, and on top of that, you know, they're basically. You know, there's been rapes happening at these protests, you know. But you know something? I take a lot of what they say with a very gigantic jar of salt. I'm not talking a pinch of salt here. I'm talking a humongous jar of salt. I mean, this is nonsense, because there's been no reports proving that. It's just rumor going around. Now, maybe there have been a few instances where certain assaults and like that have been happening, but overall, they're just trying to paint the entire movement with a broad brush, saying that everybody's like that. And they would take offense to it if you called the entire Tea Party movement racist. And, you know, because, let's face it, you've got a number of people in a rally. I remember one time on tax day, you know, there were a number of Tea Party activists in a rally in Ohio, and you had Joe the Plumber there, and he's saying, let's kill the Mexicans, you know, with a machine gun, you know. I mean, this is a problem. I mean, yes, there are probably some people there who are violent, and if they are violent, I'm sure they're kicked out. But but the problem here is, I think, yes, largely they do stand for bigger government. But to paint them all with a huge brush, because there are some libertarians in the movement, I think it's just unconscionable. Jim, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I hate it when when some kind of movement is underfoot, and then you have some ass clowns on the right or the left who aren't doing anything involved with it, who could care less, and who are seizing upon it as an opportunity to paint every single person involved as if they're all the same. When I was out there with several local libertarians marching against the Iraq war before it started, the Answer was one of the organizations that had really pushed to get the marches started. And we constantly had to keep explaining that we didn't agree with everything Answer was doing otherwise, but we were out here in support of this one particular issue. And it's just so frustrating that people who consider themselves politically sophisticated can be so damn stupid when it comes to single issues. And the fact that they bring in a wide variety of people from across the world. To me, people who do that, they seem like they're being disingenuous. I don't trust them.
Right. I want to do one more topic here and, switching gears here. But apparently another interesting news story came out this week where apparently a couple in Honolulu, Hawaii, I'm sure you guys heard about this, where they were basically caught stealing $2 sandwiches at a Safeway. And they were, they bought $50 worth of groceries. The mom, who's pregnant, was famished. And she started to munch on one of the sandwiches. And after they paid for the groceries, security guard stopped them. Turns out they had the receipt, but they didn't pay for the sandwiches. And they thought they were going to steal it. And they thought, well, they were going to get a lecture from the management. Turns out they called the cops. Cops arrested the couple. And they took their 3-year-old daughter named Sophia to Child Protective Services, and they had her in custody. And, of course, she was released 18 hours after that incident. And then now, the charges are dropped. But I'm just disgusted at exactly how a number of Americans are basically saying, well, she should have been careful. She should have known better.
Well,
I'm like...
She tried to pay for those sandwiches, too, and the manager wouldn't take the money for them.
Right.
I mean, she never denied anything that happened, but when she offered to take the money, the manager told her it's against store policy to accept money for a product once it's walked out of the store. And I'm like, really? I mean, you would think as bad as the financial state has been, that if this person was willing to be honest and just said, hey, I'm sorry, I forgot, here's the money, they would take it. I think somebody was just looking for trouble, and it's not come off real good for Safeway, so I hope whatever this person was trying to do was worth it, because now they're getting a ton of bad press.
Oh, yeah. Even though the store apologized for this, it's too late. If I were them, I would never set foot in Safeway again, even if they were invited back. I would not. Your thoughts on this, Karen? I think that must have ruffled your feathers extremely.
Well, it's just kind of crazy, and I'm not as. I think Safeway, that's a huge mistake for them, and publicity-wise, that is true. But what bothered me so much is yanking the kids and putting them into social services. Those Child Protective Services are like. It's like the precursor to the TSA. You have no right.
Even Will Grigg has
have no right.
That. Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty awful how they ride roughshod over anybody's rights, all in the name of the children, and yet they are the ones that they can't even keep their own house clean. This is CPS is indicted. Every time there's a court case, abusive kids. Well, who's the culprit? Well, they were in government care. You know, so, and we didn't know where the kid was. You know, we got complaints, but we were too overworked, quote unquote, overworked. So, you know, they're overworked because they keep grabbing kids they don't need to grab, and it's just,
right.
I don't have personal experience with it. I thank God I've never dealt with them, but from what I've read, that's what scared me. I mean, a sandwich, you lose your kid for 18 hours, and 18 hours for a little kid like that. That kid can't talk. That kid cannot bear witness. You know.
Joy, quickly here, what do you think about this?
Well, knowing that the woman was 8 months pregnant, you know, it was very obvious. She probably had a craving or whatever, but like she said, she just felt famished and felt pain and ate and perfectly planned on intending for the sandwiches, just forgot to put the tags up at the time. And it's just disgusting to see the child taken into CPS, because I do have friends that have gone through things and were wrongly charged, and it took over a year to prove the innocence to get their own children back. You know, and I've seen others that have never gotten it back because they don't want to let go of the extra funding that's coming into the city.
Right.
I mean, it's disgusting.
Right. I want to. This has been a great panel here and so forth. It's time to go to new unrules. New unrule. The state of Michigan must, and I mean must, repeal its statewide smoking ban immediately. Just recently, last August, more than 500 bars and other drinking establishments have signed a petition with a group called Protect Private Property Rights in Michigan, in which they say that they won't be serving business to state lawmakers who voted for and passed the smoking ban, which went into effect in 2010. Yep, it's a move to strong-arm the state into giving up its ban that has, for all intents and purposes, killed those bars' businesses, including the shutdown of 100 bars as a consequence of the law's effects. It's bad enough that Workface Granholm, I mean my ex-governor, signed this bill gleefully like a schoolgirl who wanted an A in her class and hoped that the state posing as her teacher would be hitting on her. It's worse enough that the people in the state have concluded, without a doubt, that smoking is killing not only the smokers, but also the people who are affected by their secondhand smoking. Haven't these fuckers figured it out that this ban kills their secret tax revenues? I mean, if businesses and their patrons wanted the smoking ban, they would have done it themselves. It's just smoking, not a brush fire for the employees' dumpsters outside. New rule. If you're a 19-year-old horny chick who slept with a 16-year-old bubblegum pop star, then the cops must not go after you for statutory rape in California. A single teenage mom has publicly claimed that media sensation Justin Bieber had sex with her almost a year ago and has since given the birth to his love child. The police want to bust her for violating the state's age of consent statute, which says that any legal teen who has sex with an illegal teen under the age of 18 by 3 years is punishable as a misdemeanor. She's even got, wait for it, death threats by the Biebs fans on Twitter. And Justin denies that he's diddled her. Come on, Bieb. Didn't you tell her during sex, who's your daddy? Who's your daddy? New rule. If you're a wealthy socialite, reality TV star, and actress Kim Kardashian, whose own father is an attorney who defended O.J., who got married to an NBA player, got shitloads of gifts and a diamond ring used during the ceremony, and then divorced after 72 days, then you must be a fucking genius, because even the Octomom couldn't pull that off at taxpayer expense. As soon as Kardashian filed for divorce, citing reconcilable differences, and urged Chris Humphries to pay for his own legal fees, she's just raked in $17.9 million off her own divorce and did not pay the $20 million that were tied to it. Does that mean she would have to sell that shit on QVC or the Home Shopping Network? And it's because she signed a prenuptial. Ingenious. Goddamn ingenious, I tell you. New rule. Memo to Lindsay Lohan. I have a suggestion for you. If you're going to reshoot your Playboy photos to be featured in an upcoming issue of Playboy, you must feature some shots in which you are manhandled by a prison guard while you had been in jail and driving drunk. That, or you need to paint yourself blue to look like a Navi from James Cameron's Avatar. Better yet, maybe you should call up Cameron and see if you can get an acting gig in the next Avatar sequel. Here's an idea. You can act drunk and even look like you're going to prison camp as a Navi in one scene. And it wouldn't be a lesbo one at that. And finally, new unrule. Mitt Romney needs to go to a gay wedding in New Hampshire and shut up about his objections to gay marriage in that state. Just days ago, at a campaign appearance in the state, Mitty pitched a fit over the state's law, which legalized same-sex marriage in 2009. Mitty says that he supports the sanctity of traditional marriage when he says, I applaud these legislators in New Hampshire who are working to defend marriage as an institution between one man and one woman. And this is coming from a Mormon candidate who believes in magic underpants. What he fails to get is that according to a poll taken by the University of New Hampshire, 62% of the New Hampshireites oppose the repeal of same-sex marriage, while only 27% support it. And of course, Mitt must think the old TV sitcom Leave It to Beaver was based on real-life families back in the 50s. Oh, yes, the old white picket fence and one man and one woman nuclear family life that was the pride and joy of being an American in those heydays. Sorry to disappoint you, Mitt, but nope, not by a libertarian long shot. Now, normally, I would say that the state should get out of the marriage business. And yes, this is exactly what the state should do at the federal and state levels. That way, anyone, regardless of sexual orientation, could marry. And it wouldn't matter whether there were two or more people agreeing to the covenant. But in the interim, as long as the state is involved, it seems only fair that it should not violate the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause, which prohibits state-mandated discrimination. What is Mitty afraid of? A couple of married men would bend him over and lead him from behind?
This institution of marriage that Mitt Romney is trying so hard to protect, is this the same institution that Kim Kardashian and Humphreys were involved in?
Exactly. Social conservatives like Romney can't stand the thought of two men uniting in the same-sex answer to matrimony, especially when it's consensual agreement between two people who love each other and want to spend the rest of their lives together in peace. And others like him have no problem saying that this practice of marriage is nothing more than an affront to their God, to their faith, and everything they stand for. Not to mention that it's supposedly an attack on the legitimacy of their marriage. Oh, right. Like gays want to march down on the state capitals in Washington, D.C. and impose their evil homosexual agenda that corrupts the children, the youth, and everyone who ought to be Christian. I've got nothing against anyone who is a Christian, but there's nothing in the Bible that really says that Jesus hates fags or doesn't want them to get married.
Actually, back then, the term Enoch referred to a male that was born that just didn't have the male virility. It had nothing to do. It was just the fact that he wasn't masculine, and it says in Scripture that Enochs are produced inside the womb.
Well,
and that even they are not denied.
Well, these people will eat anything up just to believe it. So here's my message to Mitty. Please, leave our manly gays alone. And please, just wear your magic underpants should you win the GOP nomination in the general election, and not focus on so much on whether Neil Patrick Harris and his partner are saying their I do's in front of their guests at their wedding. Oh boy, how scandalous indeed. That's all right. That's our show tonight. Thanks goes to Karen Kwiatkowski, Joy Waymire, Libertarian National Committee Chairman Mark Hinkle, and Jackie Fiest for appearing on this show. You can catch the podcast within 12 minutes after the airing of tonight's episode. That's all for tonight, folks. Thanks for listening. Good night. Jim, stick around for a few minutes so we can go over some things we need to cover here.
Mm-hmm. Will do.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks a lot, Todd, for having us. Good night.
Wow, Jim. Oh, man. Oh, boy. What did you think of tonight's show so far?
It's pretty good. Good guest lineup. Very nice.
I like the new feature of the new unrules and the end of show commentary that I provide there. So, what did you think of it? I mean, tonight it was pretty interesting.
It's definitely pretty good. I liked it. It was a nice little touch. Maybe something we'll be able to do each episode.
Yeah. So, I have to say that sometimes sometimes the new rules tend to be a little bit over the top, but yeah, that's pretty much what the show is supposed to be, a little over the top. But anyway, so your thoughts on tonight's show, pretty much overall.
Great show overall. Good guests as always. She did a great job setting that up. Some good topics. We had some great discussion. And I'd like to see everybody come back again.
Oh yeah. So I thought it was very. I thought some parts of it were very funny, like so it's there was a little humor. So you got to have a little humor in the show. But anyway, so I thought Mark Hinkle was a very good guest. What did you think of him?
Oh yeah, great. It was a great guest. It'd be nice to have him on again, or maybe somebody from his team if he's not able to next time.
Right. Okay, so we got a lot to cover for this season. So exactly what kind of guests would you like on the show? And because there's plenty of more topics that come up in the week to come. Next week, of course, Bill Maher's show, if I'm not mistaken, I believe Real Time goes off the air, goes on hiatus. And I'm just wondering exactly what we can do to, beef up the show a little bit as far as topics and the kind of guests and whatnot. So I'd love to hear any input or any ideas. I listened to the podcast on TalkShoe this last week, and I thought it went very well. What do you think?
Yeah, it definitely went very well. It was nice to not have the podcast fall apart 3 or 4 times in the middle of it and have to keep dialing in. That was definitely a pleasant change. I'm not going to mention any names. They know who they are, and they're crappy service. Anyway.
We had some very interesting guests on this show, and I guess we had a couple of people we have one people in the chat room. You're not going to believe this. It's college Republicans. And right when we were talking to Mark Hinkle, and by the way, you can get the chat log. I can show you how to do that because that's very and easily accessible. But at one point, while we were talking to Mark Hinkle about the Occupy movement, they basically were saying, well, they're nothing alike. First of all, one movement wants to work within our system, and the other wants to scrap it. And that was the whole attitude then. I noticed they were pretty silent on some of the stuff that we were basically saying. And as soon as Mark Hinkle went off the air, they left. I found that particularly interesting.
Yeah, my impression of most college Republicans is they think they know everything. Two, they're, part of the problem is they're in college, so their life experience is incredibly limited. And when you're in college, the tendency is to, I fucking know everything. It's all so simple. This is the theory. It's how it should work in the real world. And, grown-ups actually happen to know a little bit differently. And I'm sorry, some people in college, they really aren't in the grown-up phase just yet. Not because they're young, but simply because, they may have spent their entire existence in school, and they haven't lived outside of that with real responsibilities yet. And I'm sorry, maybe I'm a little prejudiced in this regard, but I tend to devalue opinions that seem to be based only on philosophy and on a real-life application. And as far as college Republicans go, they tend to be some of the worst, just right along with their progressive counterparts who are in college, with the I know everything because this is the philosophy that I've been told to believe. Not that I've actually ever done this in practice and can actually point to something and say it's worked here.
I love the part in the end of the show commentary where I talk about Mitt Romney, where I go, a couple of married men would bend him over and lead him from behind, and I thought, oh my God, I probably won't get in trouble for saying that, but it's funny, hilarious, but oh boy, but yeah, I wanted to, but I think we're doing very well, the show has started out pretty low as far as the number of people listening in, but I'm hoping that more and more people have tuned in tonight. And, this is a good time to see how people think about the show and whatnot. So I think the show is going to be doing pretty well. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what kind of new guests. What kind of guests did you want to have on the show to interview? Last week we had Ethan Lee Vita. This week we had, of course, Mark Hinkle, the party, the chair of the Libertarian Party. I'm sure you had some good, interesting guys in mind.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'd like to take a look at getting some authors online on the show and get to discuss their books a little bit and how they relate to the liberty movement. They don't all necessarily have to be libertarians, but they don't
necessarily have to be libertarians, but it would be interesting to see, but I like the idea of, it would be interesting to have, say, Match or, somebody like, you could have somebody like, I don't know, like, oh God, I'm trying to think. I'm going brain dead here for a second. But I think we should have some good authors on here who are probably of the progressive mindset to a certain extent, ones who are, could side with us on the Iraq War issue. I mean, the ones who are principled. We could have somebody like, for example, Glenn Greenwald. If we could get Glenn Greenwald on the show, and he's basically a very strong libertarian-leaning progressive, that would be great.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Glenn Green.
Some people whose perspective may not be as close to ours and as in line with our own, who might be able to challenge some of our own ideas and come up with different ways of doing things or different ways of approaching the problem.
Right. What's interesting here is that, I think that, there are a lot of different people out there who are interested in ideas and political discussion ideas. I noticed some interesting people. One interesting person I would love to have on the show I noticed he's been a guest on the air, on shows like antiwar.com radio, you could have like Camille Apolia, or somebody who is, or you could have somebody who is like a conservative author on here. We could probably talk to them about somebody interesting.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yes. Look at it a little bit.
Yeah. So, let's see here. I thought the topics were great tonight. I thought that discussion that we got into a little bit about the couple that was arrested for the sandwiches, wasn't that a shitty deal?
Yeah, there's some bozo in that Safeway store there who made that decision, because anybody who's trained in asset protection is not going to worry over $5. The potential legal ramifications of that are too big, and of course the PR shitstorm that Safeway has to deal with right now over that. That $10 that they might have recovered from those two sandwiches, they're going to lose so much more in bad publicity. Whoever made that decision cannot possibly have been somebody who's trained in asset protection, because they don't care about little numbers like that. That's not what they're there for. They're there for the bigger losses, like somebody, walking out with DVDs from the DVD rack or something like that, things that cost more money, employee stealing, things like that. The fact that some stupid, I'm guessing it has to be an assistant store manager or store manager, made that call to have them arrested over $10 sandwiches shows that it's not somebody who's actually trained for that, and somebody who should have been doing it. And that person, quite frankly, has probably ended their career.
Right. Anyway, I guess we're done here, dude. We're done tonight, and we will see you guys next week. And take it easy. Have a good one, guys. See ya. Bye now.
Later.